Okay, and welcome. So today is the day, or tomorrow is the day of the historic summit meeting between Kim Jong Un and the President of the United States this year in Singapore. So one of the things that we looked at the other day in the last video is the astrology of the trip for Trump. And today, what we're going to do is look at the astrology for the trip for Kim Jong Un, as well as the astrology for the meeting between the two of them on the 12th at 9 a.m., because now I have all the times in. So it's some pretty interesting stuff. So, one of the ways that this is useful, well, maybe not useful, it's certainly revealing, is that it can often give us a description of either A, what we're walking into, or B, what to how to navigate these situations as best we can. The thing to remember when you're doing astrology is that as nice as it sounds to be able to pick times that favor you and work in your favor, the universe doesn't always play out like that. So a lot of times what we see with an astrology chart is actually a mirror or a reflection of situations and circumstances that are meant to unfold in exactly the way that they're unfolding. So we don't always have as much control over the outcomes of situations as we'd like to believe. And astrology, especially when you're doing things like this, where you're trying to look at the unfolding of events for certain times, or even trying to pick them, we don't always have a lot of control over that. So, where there are opportunities for free will for us to make decisions about how we're going to navigate the course of events, we're able to pick times that are better suited to us and our activities, which is a lot of work, by the way. It's a lot more complicated than just doing a natal chart. And the thing should fall into place without a hitch. But even then, there's no guarantee that this favoritism will benefit you or last any length of time, because ultimately we have to look at your dharma and what you're supposed to be having for experiences in this lifetime and through these moments. So, for instance, if you set up an electoral chart to get married on a specific day because you're absolutely determined that this person is going to marry you and you're going to stay married to them and it's going to be good for you, it's all going to benefit you, you might theoretically be able to set up an electional chart for the moment you guys get married to benefit you, and everything would look beautiful and everything will fall on your side and the wedding will start without a hitch, so the time will be correct. But that doesn't guarantee that you will stay married to this person or that you'll be happily married. And the reason is, if your dharma is something else, the things that you build on these false origins, remember we talk about math calculations. If you get the foundation numbers wrong, if you get the time of the natal chart wrong, if it's off by a couple minutes, those foundation numbers, the original numbers, throw the calculations off for everything. And it's the same thing for the best laid plans of mice and men. So if your foundation or your original intent or root reason for beginning an endeavor is not in line with your dharma, then the intention and the root and the activity is going to be wrong, and it's literally going to be trying to build a house on quicksand. So you can certainly play around with electional charts to try and figure out how to time things to better suit you. But ultimately, you'll find many times when there are fated situations involved, no matter what time you pick, circumstances and events will fall into place in such a way that will change the time this thing starts, so that the chart for the time or the event becomes a mirror or an accurate reflection of what is supposed to happen. So, food for thought. The things that we learn the hard way, right? Okay. So before we get into the North Korea summit, let's go. No, you know what? Let's do the North Korea summit. And I'm sorry, the Singapore summit between North Korea and the United States. And then we'll go back and look at Kim Jong Un's chart. All right. So this is the chart for the summit set for 9 a.m. Singapore time in Singapore. So this is the equivalent of a meeting chart. So if you were having a meeting with somebody, family members, friends, enemies, lawyers, this chart should give you a sense of what you can expect during the meeting and what the purpose of the meeting is. Coughing. Oops, sorry. So, and again, remember, the definition of a successful trip or a successful meeting or a successful anything is that it has met our expectations. So if you're going on a honeymoon and your spouse spends all their time working and discovers the cure for cancer, that was a very successful first profession, but the trip itself was not successful because that's not what it was intended for. So this particular meeting in Singapore, as far as we can tell, the intentions or reasons for this meeting is to completely denuclearize, remove all nuclear weapons from North Korea, and to try and build some semblance of an alliance, which you would have to have for someone to disarm themselves. So a nuclear weapon is literally the equivalent of somebody else holding a firearm. And if somebody is that concerned about their safety that they feel like they need a firearm, they're not laying their weapon down until they're absolutely sure that you're not going to hurt them and they're not going to get hurt by other people. So you can imagine how wildly resistant any country, but especially a small one with, a dictator running it, who's been standing on principle for eons, as a sole source and claim to power. Like, you can imagine how resistant he's going to be giving up his little guns, right? And then, of course, you've got the big blowhard braggart that's like, oh, yeah, the big bully on the block, who's basically trying to corner him and make him give up his guns. So this is not a great way to start a relationship. So, but let's look at the chart. Okay. So at 9 a.m. on June 12th, 2018, at the beginning of this meeting, we have 18 Cancer rising. We also have 20 Aries on the midheaven. So the two planets we're going to look for first are the moon, which is going to rule the ascendant and the tone of the meeting, and Mars, which is going to rule the ultimate outcome of this meeting. Let me get rid of some of this other stuff in here. There we go. Okay, so the first thing, and here's the other thing. So first house, seventh house. Who's the first? Who's the seventh? And it's it's a little bit tricky in relationships when we're doing charts like this. So in this particular instance, what I would do is I would not assign both parties to either houses. I would read this as a different kind of chart. So we're not going to worry about first house is this person, seventh house is that person. So just put that aside because we're not going to use that in this type of chart work. So the first house with Cancer rising, the moon rules the event, okay? So, and the moon, or the ruler of the first house, which in this case is the moon, is going to set the tone for the entire event or the entire meeting, okay? Now, unfortunately, what we have is, of all the fixed stars to have prominent in this chart, we have Algol, which is Medusa's head, conjuncting the moon, which is one of the lights in the chart. So the sun and the moon are very important in a chart. And of course, Algol has to be conjunct the moon. And worse, because this couldn't get more touchy, this couldn't be touchy enough, that moon conjunct Algol is the ruler of the chart. So now some information about Algol. You can certainly look this up on the internet and get some really great mythology and stories about that. Algol is a fascinating planet. Algol has typically been associated with, evil. Now, the thing to remember is that with everything, whether it's the Bible or astrological fixed stars or, Sanskrit writings, we have to put the language in the context of the time. Okay? So in this time, this way back before God knows when time, when these fixed stars were first seen and assigned names and mythologies, homosexuality was seen as evil. Women were seen as evil. Women in positions of power who owned themselves, that weren't acting as, breeding cattle or breeding stock, and footstools for the men around them, they were seen as evil. Women asserting themselves was seen as hysterical, right? And all that sort of stuff. Now, I say this because when you read the mythology about Algol, these references are made a lot about this being an evil star and having to do with homosexuality. and people being hysterical and out of their minds and this, that, and the other thing. And it also apparently is associated with beheading or losing one's head or, losing one's mind. Although in this case, losing one's head is a slang for losing control of yourself, and having outbursts and fits. And this is the ruler of the meeting. Woohoo! Now, the thing about Algol that is not discussed a lot because it just wasn't considered an option at the time that this was identified. And some people who live in caves right now, or at least intellectual caves, still fight this. But Algol has a lot to do with feminine power, and you will see Algol prominent in charts where feminism, or women who represent solid gains in feminism, historically have come into or risen to power, made important decisions that had a lot to do with equality and raising women above the level of breeding cattle stock. So Algol is associated with feminism. And of course, naturally, if you're against feminism, you're going to see any woman asserting herself, as being irrational and angry and losing her head and hysterical and all this sort of stuff. So take that stuff with a grain of salt. Remember the context with which it is delivered. However, Algol does have to do with that, and that's just a sidebar. In this particular chart, I don't think that makes a huge difference, because we've got two men, and they're not talking about humanitarian equal rights for women globally. This is two men in basically a big measuring contest. Okay, so this does not look good. Now, the only thing that could make this worse is if the moon were in hard aspect or challenging aspect to other planets in the chart. Luckily, thank our lucky stars, this is not the case. So the moon, even though it's an Algol, conjunct Algol in a rules chart, is not making hard aspects to other planets. In fact, the aspects that this moon is making, its only aspect that it is making is Venus in that first house, and Venus is exalted in Cancer. As a matter of fact, the moon and Venus are in mutual reception. They're actually exchanging houses. So what this means, one, with the moon only making a final aspect to Venus before it changes signs. Literally, this is the last chance saloon. This will never happen again. So it is imperative, and there's a sense of urgency that this has to be done right. Okay? Above and beyond all of the media hype like this, the people involved, Kim Jong Un and Trump, both recognize that this is the one time they got to get it right there, or the one chance that they're going to have to play their card, is actually probably the better way to describe it. So with the moon and Venus in mutual reception, what this also means is that creative solutions and the opportunity to find a loophole or a way out of the situation is going to come much easier. So in spite of the fact that the moon is conjunct hysterical Algol, and it's quite possible that one or both of them will lose their ever-loving minds during this meeting. Oh my Lord, can you imagine? It is making a sextile, and it is in mutual reception to Venus. So some of that crazy is going to have a cap on it, thank God. And the better side of this, for personal interest, is still within reach. So we should get, if nothing else, we should get peaceful resolve, even if it is a peaceful resolve to agree to disagree and let things sit for a while. So this does not mean that North Korea will denuclearize, and it does not mean that Kim Jong Un is going to get whatever demands he's bringing to the table, and he's bringing his stuff too. But it does mean that there is the possibility that they could both walk away in a draw, like a tie, like in a gambling game, right, where nobody wins, nobody loses, with just an even draw. And the matter will just sit for a while, and I would be okay with that too, because Jesus, between the two of them, the last thing is either one of them like popping like popcorn, right? Okay. So the next thing we look at in this meeting chart is the midhaven, because the midhaven is the very top of the chart. It is the purpose of the business. It is the highest destiny that this thing can unfold as. This is the highest aspiration we can reach. Now, if you look at this, We have Aries ruling the midheaven. We have Uranus in the 10th, right? We got more crazy going on here. And more importantly, the ruler of that midheaven is Mars, okay, which is deposited by Uranus, Mr. Crazy. Anyway, so Mars, the ruler of the midheaven, okay, is conjunct the South Node in the 7th house. So the 7th house has to do with diplomacy and relationships and alliances and enemies. With Mars and the South Node together, this close by 1 degree in that 7th house, it indicates a breakdown of not communication, but this is a breakdown of diplomacy. So I would not be surprised. I don't think anybody would be surprised at this point, although we're all really crossing our fingers hoping this will not happen. I would not be surprised if there was some type of, Algolian type outburst, some type of, tantrum or crazy behavior, right? And resulting in a breakdown of diplomacy. And this is literally a real consideration with both of them, not just one of them. So the other thing is with that 10th house ruler conjunct the South Node in the 7th house, it's a dissolution. There will be no moving forward with this situation. So whatever we get at this meeting, it stops here. It will not move forward. So with that said, I do not see any future progress or actions being taken that are going to come from this meeting. This is literally just a big old stalemate we're walking into here. So get rid of some of this. Yeah, isn't that something? Jesus, Algol conjunct Moon. We got Uranus in the 10th house, and it's dispositing the Mars, which rules the 10th. Eee! I cannot imagine how much Valium or Xanax all the people in attendance at this meeting, other than those two, are taking, because they're clenching so tightly. I'm sure that their blood pressure is so high, it's probably going through the ceiling. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, it's like being with a bomb squad while they're diffusing a bomb, except you don't have a bomb suit, right? Okay. All right. So the 7th house, diplomacy, alliances, enemies, relationships, right? So what's going on here? What else do we know, right? Well, Pluto on that 7th house gives us some really important information. And the information that it brings us is how these two people are going to interact with each other. When we have this face-to-face meeting, what's on the table between them? Is this a bromance, or is this, sibling rivalry, or, is this, a social engagement, or, what kind of tone or feel are we looking at, given that we've got all this crazy going on up here, okay? And we've got this breakdown of diplomacy over here. Well, Pluto is right here on the 7th house cusp. And what that means is that both parties are coming to this meeting fully loaded, and it's all about power. This has nothing to do with global peace. This has nothing to do with money. This has nothing to do with what's good for everybody around them. This is all absolutely and unapologetically about power. Who has it? Who wants more of it? Who's keeping what they have? And who's losing it? So the thing with Pluto to understand, especially Pluto angular, Pluto is the higher octave of Mars, okay? And what that means is that in terms of conflict, right, where you're facing off with one other person, there are no happy mediums. There are no compromises. Pluto is all or nothing at all. So in situations like this, there's only one winner as far as they're concerned, and that winner gets everything they want, not some of it, not part of it and the rest of it, but only with these considerations. There is no negotiation where Pluto's concerned unless you're talking about hostage negotiations. So with Pluto on that 7th house and the house of face-to-face relationships and diplomacy and, allies and enemies, both parties are bringing a tremendous amount of weight to this meeting, and it all has to do with power. And literally, excuse my language, if you're delicate of hearing, please cover your ears right now and count to 5. This literally all has to do with a dick swinging contest. Who's bigger than the other one, unfortunately. The problem is that this involves the rest of us who live on the planet with these two whack jobs. So, not good, not good at all. So this will not be this will be a very, very tense meeting. It will be a very unpredictable meeting. It will literally, I can't imagine how much alcohol and sedatives the people around them are taking to try and keep the lid on this thing before it explodes and turns into World War III. And ultimately, the thing that we have to go with right now that's going to help make us feel better about this is the fact that the moon only makes one final aspect in this chart. It literally only makes one aspect, and then the chart's no good. You're starting a whole new cycle, and that is right here. It is a sextile to Venus in the first house. So Venus is angular. So there is the possibility that these two could essentially, cross your fingers, just walk away from the table with nothing changed. Because neither one of them is going to bend, neither one of them is going to compromise, and neither one of them is going to flex. And the problem is they're not even willing to make concessions to each other. Literally, it's my way or the highway all the way in this particular instance. And the challenge with that, of course, is you got two people whose idea of my way is like not necessarily the most realistic version of my way. All right, so the other thing I want to draw your attention to, so in matters of meetings, right? Anytime you're dealing with a human being, you have to be able to communicate. Okay, you have to be able to communicate. Communication is everything. So one of the things we're also going to look at is how are they going to communicate with each other? Where will this breakdown be? Will it be because of something that's said or it's something that's done? Like, are they even understanding each other? So we look for Mercury. So Mercury is right here in Gemini. Mercury is in its ruler, which means the communication and the information exchange, all of these things will be crystal clear and very strong. As a matter of fact, Mercury, I believe, is out of bounds. So there will be many words, many, many, many words. Like literally like out of control teenagers chatting away. Lots and lots and lots and lots of back and forth. Oh my God. It will be interesting to see if this meeting drags on longer than they expected. And I say that because Mercury and Gemini will exaggerate all of this communication and prolong it, right? And with it near the part of fortune, it should make it productive. So there should be some productive conversation coming out of this, even if they don't get what they want. And the other reason I say I wonder if it's going to go longer than expected, because the moon is in Taurus, which is a fixed sign, and the moon in Taurus rules the ascendant or the meaning itself, and Taurus is a very slow, patient sign. Taurus has got all the time in the world as far as they're concerned, so you're on their time. The other thing is that Pluto on the seventh house, Pluto also is a patient planet. So Pluto and Saturn is a very patient sign. So Moon in Taurus, Pluto and Capricorn, both of these controlling the angles of the chart. This is not something that's going to start and end quickly. This could take a while, and certainly longer than people were initially prepared for, especially with Chatterbox Mercury in its own sign, literally going to town like I don't know, out of control teenager on a telephone. So my take on the meeting is that it's going to be a draw. I don't see any changes or any progress being made from this meeting in terms of meaningful action after this. Whatever goes on at this meeting ends at the meeting, and they will walk away from the table without having achieved anything. And I believe that it is going to be because, one, diplomacy will break down, between them. There's going to be a lot of words passed back and forth between them. With Mercury in the 12th house, there's a lot we're not going to hear about. Which actually may be good. Also with Pluto on that seventh house of face-to-face negotiations, neither one of them are willing to compromise or make concessions. So literally, they want everything or nothing gets exchanged. So it's unfortunately, it sounds a lot like a hostage negotiation, like that kind of my way or everything I want or nothing at all. And the other thing is that with the moon ruling the chart conjunct Algol, like this is Mars ruling the midhaven, disposited by Uranus in the 10th. So we got a whole lot of crazy at the table. Whee! But there should be some successful resolve for this in terms of a peaceful ending, meaning we don't end up in World War III. So I'm good with that. So for us, this should be successful because we will not, end up dealing with nuclear bombs falling all over the place right now. However, for them, because the purpose of their meeting obviously is to fulfill their own agendas, and I don't see that it's going to be a successful meeting for them. I don't think that either one of them are going to accomplish what they set out to accomplish with this meeting. However, I will say that in terms of strength, and well, no, I'm not even going to speculate about that. I suspect that Kim Jong Un has the upper hand in this situation, and it's not necessarily because of this chart. If we look at Kim Jong Un's chart, which we're going to do right now, for his trip, there's Trump, for his trip to Singapore, this tells us everything. So remember, when we look at the charts for a trip, when we look at the time that we touch down, this is the information I'm pulling off the internet from the news sources. This should tell us about our experience on this trip and how this feels for us, right? So the first thing we're going to look at for Kim Jong Un is, again, always the ruler of the chart, which is Venus, right? Look at that. Venus is at the top of the chart. It's in exaltation. Venus is taking beautiful. It's, well, I mean, it's past that. So it's pretty wide. I'm not really going to use that because I don't like wide stuff. But just this alone, Venus in the 10th house, very visible in exaltation, ruling the chart. Kim Jong Un is walking into Singapore, and he is going to be, his experience will be one of a very well received and well respected guest. Go figure, right? Now, I know there are those of you out there like, oh, Kim Jong Un, he's awful, blah, blah, blah. And listen, I get it. I totally get it. I'm not in love with either one of these knuckleheads. But in terms of his experience there, this is what Kim Jong Un is walking into. So he's getting a much warmer reception and a lot more respect coming in than Trump is. Because remember, Trump over here, chart ruler again, Cancer rises, but for him on this trip, the moon is in Aries. It's in a weak position. The moon does not like being in Aries, and it's void of course. Literally, this whole trip for Trump is nothing. If nothing is going to go the way it's supposed to, and he's not going to get what he wants out of this. So, and with the moon void, of course, you always feel like a stranger in a strange land kind of thing. Like you just don't connect with the people around you. So he's not gonna. There's no human connection with people around him, and this is very critical if you expect to get stuff done. And certainly with the assistance of other people, because honestly, nobody gets anything done without the assistance of other people. So the other thing now, and here's what I thought was interesting. So, one of the things when we looked at Trump's chart in the other video is this, we saw this. It's like Venus in the first house is usually a very nice position, but nothing else in his chart indicates that he's going to be enjoying himself there or feel good about being there. Everything else around him, as far as this chart is concerned, indicates somebody's going to feel very isolated, very vulnerable, very powerless, and very much at the mercy whim of other people, even though they're being very polite to you, to your face. There's no meaningful connections being made, or warm or affectionate connections being made anywhere else in the chart. So, and again, I was saying, I don't imagine he will ever return to Singapore after this, because this will not be a good experience for him. But there's Venus in the first house, exalting Cancer. Well, that's kind of weird. What is that about, right? And it just finished making a square to the moon, but we're going to leave that alone for a second because that's an old aspect. So I couldn't make heads or tails of that. And, sometimes this happens with astrology. So this is kind of fun when we watch things unfold. So here's the thing. Apparently, the Singaporean government, as an act of diplomacy and probably to placate him, decided to throw him a birthday party 3 days early. Okay, or 3 days ahead of his birthday. Well, what is birthday? The birthday is the Venus, because it's a pleasurable social occasion. Birthday parties have cake and food, right? What is Cancer? Food, nourishment, right? Venus in Cancer would absolutely describe a birthday party. So there's that Venus in that first house in his chart for his trip, indicating some type of pleasurable social concession or recognition being given to him. Unfortunately, nothing else in the chart walks with that. So that's an isolated thing. And, excuse me. Yeah, I wouldn't do too much else with that. Okay, so, but I thought that was interesting. Venus in Cancer. Couldn't figure in the first. I couldn't figure what that was about, but lo and behold, they throw an early birthday party. Now it is in a wide, and I don't like wide orbs, so bear with me. It's in wide opposition to Pluto. So again, we referenced this in the other video. This is all about manipulation and politics and power and managing people. So that birthday party was rife with power plays. So it wasn't just a simple celebration because, hey, buddy, we love you. Happy birthday. All right. So back to Kim Jong Un. So his chart ruler is in Venus. It is exalted. It's in the 10th house. He's sitting pretty in Singapore. He's well received. He's well respected. People are okay with him, and he's feeling okay with them. So the other things that we look at in the chart, obviously, we look at the moon. Okay. The moon in Kim Jong Un's chart is conjunct Uranus. Yikes! Well, holy crap! What does that mean, right? Well, who let the dogs out, or who let the crazies in? So with the moon's in Taurus, the moon is exalted, and again, the moon has strength, and it's in mutual reception with Venus. Okay, so and Venus is in the 10th house of his chart. So for this trip, Kim Jong Un is in the catbird seat. He's in the power seat. He's literally in the throne during this trip, and he knows it. And he knows it. With the moon Uranus conjunct like that, again, there's a lot of instability, and a lot of unpredictability. And the 7th house in your trip chart, remember, the 7th house is other people. So in Trump's chart, remember in the other video we talked about it? The 7th house is other people, and he's got Saturn there. So people are very polite because Capricorn is very much about your manners. But they're also very cool and distant and reserved and not letting him in. There's that wall. Remember I was telling you that wall he wants to build between us and Mexico? Well, he's walking right into a social equivalent of it here in Singapore between him and everybody else. So here in Kim Jong-un's chart, in that 7th house, we've got the moon and Uranus in the 7th. And if this is other people, this means that Kim Jong-un is walking in and literally dealing with crazy people. Well, you can imagine who that is. So we're not okay with that. And this is not, for the record, if you were taking a trip, this is not the aspect you want to walk into. So you never want to take a trip where you end up dealing with a moon Uranus conjunction in your 7th house facing you, because that means that literally the people you're having face-to-face confrontation or conversations with, net positive or negative, you're dealing with crazy people and unpredictable people, and most important, unstable people. So this is what Kim Jong-un is walking into. So again, this kind of reinforces the suspicion that all the crazy is coming from the other side. And we talked about that back in the Trump June 12th quarter moon video, because he's going to be, I think, the bigger problem here than Kim Jong-un. Wait, okay. So there's that. But again, the moon, which is Kim Jong-un's moon, is in mutual reception with Venus. So he's got a lot of 7th house, other people, 10th house, people in power. He's got a lot of protection and support from the people around him. So he's going to be just fine, and he knows it. He knows it, honey. Okay. Now, the other thing that we're looking at is we've got, again, dun, 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 look at this. We've got Pluto on an angle, dead on an angle, right? So planets that come near an angle really emphasize the crap out of them. So Pluto at the foundation of this chart, on the Imium Coeli, the IC, the nadir, right? The foundation of the house. Pluto on that angle by 1 degree absolutely makes that Pluto a powerhouse tent stake, okay? So what this means is that the foundation that Kim Jong-un stands on coming into this country is loaded with power and influence and protection, and he is no joke, honey. He is prepared and ready. So in terms of a battle, right, we're not going to World War III, kids. Keep that in mind. But in terms of battle, confrontation, war, like even if it's war across the diplomacy table, Kim Jong-un in this trip has it hands down. He's got all the advantages working in his place, and he is no joke. This is not somebody to piss off. So one of the things that I would wonder is who is protecting him. Singapore's got a lot of money flowing through there, but I don't know that they have necessarily a lot of power and influence. Maybe they do. I mean, money talks, right? But Kim Jong Un certainly has a lot of what is the word that I'm looking for? Where you have people standing behind you, like the what is it? It's literally like the nerdy little kid that's got like the football team standing behind him, ready to jump to his defense if you keep bothering him, and that's the position Kim Jong Un is in. Woo. So that's interesting. And again, because it's Pluto, it's all underground behind the scenes. So these are not visible players to us. But they're, make no mistake about it, they are there. So, and that makes all kinds of sense because remember, I was saying that there is, in the first video about Trump, June 12th, and the quarter moon, one of the things we were looking at is there was almost this sense that the meeting or Kim Jong Un, it was very much about the messenger, not the meeting itself. So the meeting is a big circus show to distract us from the fact that there's actually messages being passed back and forth and communications that are occurring that could not happen otherwise because it would have been noticed. So there's a lot of like a magic show. Like what we're looking at is literally just a distraction from the real work that's going on somewhere else. So there's a whole lot of sleight of hand where communication and information is concerned here. So that's a little worrying. And I'm not a fan of conspiracy theories. So if I'm worried about this, there's something to be worried about. Anyway, blah blah blah. Which is to say that the big powers, the big forces in power that are controlling a lot of stuff these days, and certainly has their hooks in our government, may not have anything to do with the figureheads that we're looking at, like Kim Jong Un and Trump. Like these are figureheads; they're puppets. They're not the people that are making things happen or directing the or navigating the direction of the ship. And that is most concerning because if you can't see who's navigating the ship, you have no way of knowing how to control it or change the direction or the course that you're headed on. Okay, so there's that. So the sun for Kim Jong Un is in his eighth house. The sun is not happy in the eighth house, but it has a little bit of strength. And I'm not feeling anything amazing with that. So some of the he doesn't really have a lot of power coming in the situation. All the power that he has is being borrowed from other people or loaned to him from other people because Pluto is on the angle down at the nadir, right? And his sun is in the eighth house, which has a lot to do with what other people give you in terms of support. The only power and influence he has during his trip here is the moon and Venus, both in angular houses, both in mutual reception, which means that he has the sympathetic vote. So he has a lot of sympathy and emotional support from people around him, including his backers, obviously. So that's where a lot of his protection is coming in. The other things that I thought were interesting about this chart for him, right? So some things that we're looking at. So he carries Saturn in the third house, so I don't see him getting out and about in public very much. And also Saturn in Capricorn can be a bit of a snob. So if he travels at all during this trip, it's going to be local, third house, okay? It's going to be very limited in range and certainly very exclusive, Saturn. And I would expect it to be very high end and very much about the highest echelons of whatever. So he's not going to go hit the town or anything like that. It's very limited engagements in very, very high status places in the very immediate vicinity of where he's at. Also, too, in terms of being supported and loved and received well, he has Jupiter in the first house. So he's, again, reinforces this idea that he is very well received. And also with Scorpio there, again, behind the scenes power brokers. There's a whole lot of behind the scenes support for him from powerful people. So and here's something interesting about this chart, right? So the sun is still squaring Neptune in his chart. So the thing about it is, even with all this support and this status and elevation and protection that he's getting on this trip, he's still dealing with crazy people. This is not something anybody wants to walk into. So what else would be going on that would even make this worthwhile? Why is he doing this, right? So remember, the sun is in the eighth house. This is other people's resources. So these are other people that are supporting him. He may be beholden to other people to do this, which would make perfect sense to me because I'm completely convinced that Papa Putin is responsible for him showing up this meeting, and he wouldn't do it otherwise. So if that is the case, right, the sun squares Neptune in the fifth. So the sun is our identity and our direction and our consciousness, right? And when it is square Neptune, there's a lot of confusion, right? So we're not completely sure or clear why we're compelled to do something. So for him, I would not be surprised if he's not completely clear what his role in this meeting is either, which is even more interesting and a lot more alarming. With Neptune in the fifth, squaring that sun in the eighth, Neptune in the fifth, well, and it's trining Jupiter in the first. So, and this is going to sound really weird. So, with this particular aspect, this has a lot to do with love, right? And being loved and being supported, and having people in your corner and people liking you, right? People wanting to support your cause, people wanting to get behind you, trying to maintain that positive feeling with the sun squaring it, or at least squaring Neptune of all things, right? The problem is, even though this is what we're about, we are not completely sure how we're supposed to get that accomplished, right? Because we are in somebody else's pocket. So I don't know if we'll ever find out about that. But if we do, it would be interesting to watch. So, and I'm not that well versed in politics. I apologize, kids. So there's a whole lot of other stuff. I'm sure the information is out there. I just don't know what it is. But if you have that information and you can make citations for it, you're welcome to post them in the comments because we'd all like to take a look at that. Okay. And the seventh house. So remember we talked about the seventh house, that moon Uranus, like the people that he deals with face to face are going to be like, he's dealing with crazy people, right? So here's something interesting as well. Look at this. Mars rules the seventh house of other people. And look at this. Again, the breakdown. Mars, the ruler, is conjunct the south node in the fourth house. So the end of this trip will result in a breakdown in something, or whatever it is, whether it's relationships or communications or the purpose of the meaning, whatever. There's a complete breakdown and a loss here. So there will be no gain for him from this trip as a result of this aspect. So the other thing that we look at, again, is how do we determine if something is successful, right? So the 10th house is the purpose of something, right? So the 10th house in this chart is the moon, okay? The moon is conjunct Uranus. This is not good. So this is literally a wild card. So we're not completely sure how this is going to go. And we're understanding that we're not dealing with people who are going to be as predictable as we'd like them to be. So there's a whole lot of unknown variables, Uranus, involved in this situation as far as the outcome or the goals for this meeting, right? So the moon makes a trine to Saturn, okay, in the third. And what that means is that in theory, because it's the third house, back to this Mercury Gemini thing, in theory, this meeting is supposed to be about the meeting of the minds or discussion, coming to agreements, not necessarily doing anything, coming to more than agreements, coming to an understanding. That's what this is supposed to be about, okay, this meeting. But will it be successful? Well, if we take the moon, which rules that 10th house, right, and we make the next applying aspect, all right, or along with it, it's going to be, look at this, it's going to be a square to that Mars Uranus, or Mars South Node, which rules the 7th house. So on the one hand, there is an ease. So the only success in this meeting is that there will be an understanding. They will have reached an understanding, okay, without any confusion or debate. They will understand what each other's position is, okay, because that will be crystal clear, baby, crystal clear. However, the understanding that they come to may not be a positive one, because after the moon leaves this trine, the very next aspect is going to be that Mars South Node breakdown in that fourth house, which also rules the end of the matter. So I would say, in terms of what's going to be accomplished in this trip, I think the only thing that's going to be accomplished is that there's going to be an absolute and clear and firm understanding where people stand, which is pretty much not going to be anywhere they hoped they would be standing at the end of this meeting. I don't think anybody's getting what they want. I think, if anything, it's going to galvanize and really, drop the hammer and put people in their lane and make it clear that this is the lane you will be in and you will not get into my lane. End of conversation. I'm pretty sure that's how this is going to go. Well, based on this chart. So things to look for also. So we know the moon is exalted and it's angular, right, over here, which gives, +1 to Kim Jong Un for having a good experience here. Venus is, again, exalted and angular, again, +1 for this being a positive trip for him. They're in mutual reception, again, +1 for Kim Jong Un. So right off the top of the chart, right off the bat, we've got all sorts of good things happening for him. He's getting a lot of very positive, supportive reception in Singapore. Things that we also look for are rulerships. So what do we have that's strong and really gonna drive things, forward, as it were? We've got Mercury, Neptune, and Saturn all in rulership for Trump's trip, for Kim Jong Un's trip, and for the meeting. So this right here, Mercury, Neptune, and Saturn, are the key themes that we're looking for in terms of this experience that they're all sharing, right? So communications. Boundaries, Saturn, okay, and also loss, all right, and overstepping boundaries, Neptune. So this is very much about communicating about boundaries and what will and won't happen and where those boundaries actually are. Interesting stuff. Now, what's important for this trip for Kim Jong Un is, and here we're going to drag in a little fixed star called Castor. Castor is at the top of this chart. Now, fixed stars are a lot like spices when you're cooking. So they are nice, they're helpful. They'll totally change the flavor of what you're dealing with, but ultimately they are still a spice. So you can't rest the entire dish on the spice that you're using. The dish has to be able to stand well on its own, and the spice has to enhance it. So this fixed star can only enhance what the chart promises. It cannot override the chart, and it cannot repair a chart. So remember everything that we've said about this trip. And now with any planet, especially fixed stars on the midheaven, this is a very amplified what is the word I'm looking for? It's a very amplified presence in the chart. Okay. So the information that we have about Castor, and you can certainly look that up online. Castor is the mortal twin, because it's Castor and Pollux is the immortal twin who never dies, and Castor is the mortal one. Castor is famous for his skill in taming and managing horses, sometimes called Apollo, and symbolically named a ruler yet to come. According to Ptolemy, it is of the nature of Mercury, to Wilson, Simonite, and Pierce of Mars, Venus, and Saturn, and to Alvidas of the Moon, Mars, and Uranus. Castor gives distinction, a keen intellect, success in law and many travels, fondness for horses, sudden fame and honor, but often followed by loss of fortune and disgrace, sickness, trouble, and great affliction. Its natives are said to be mischievous and prone to violence. Castor is associated with guile and duplicity. Castor has specific associations with breaking an arm or leg, and this may come from a Ptolemaic classification of Castor as a Mercury star, which is much associated with the limbs generally. Castor is also noted in natal astrology for proneness to mental breakdowns and neurotic distress. People with this star prominent and well aspected are exceptionally gifted intellectually. Castor is influenced by Mercury and has a blend of Jupiter in it. So, yay. Okay, so that's the information we have about Castor. So one of the things that we know is with Castor on the midheaven, some of the things that we can expect. Obviously, there's with everything else we've just seen in the chart, this is an echo or repetition or reinforcement of the concern that there may be mental breakdowns or irrational tantrums that occur during this meeting, and certainly on Kim Jong Un's trip. Also, with Castor on the top of the chart, this elevates the person. So Kim Jong Un may very well achieve a significant elevation in global status and visibility, and honors. He may get more respect as a result of this trip. So how he handles himself, and how he handles the situation, is very much a make or break it type of event for him. So it's not about the outcome, it's about how he conducts himself. And if he's dealing with the big bag of crazy we think is going to be popping up here, then anybody having how they handle that situation would certainly be getting top honors if they handled it well. So that, my lovies, is the chart for Kim Jong Un's trip to Singapore and the chart for the North Korea United States Summit. So we will see how this plays out. And remember, kids, before you start anything, learn how to finish it. Try not to paint yourself in the corners. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.